These Israeli soldiers were amongst the first group that crossed into southern Lebanon. Now, Israel's calling it a limited operation, but effectively it looks like it's trying to clear Hezbollah from a corridor along the border. They encountered not only Hezbollah resistance in the village, but then there were other Hezbollah units that moved in. Heavy firefight. The Israeli Defense Forces say they eventually took over the village, but it was at great cost. Not only those 8 killed, but dozens who were wounded. That being said, and I just need to emphasize this, as much as this might be a symbolic shock to the Israelis, there, of course, are far more Lebanese civilians, as well as Hezbollah fighters, who have been killed in this opening phase of the ground invasion.
Well, Scott, does it also show us how difficult it is for Israeli forces fighting in Lebanon's southern border villages where Hezbollah has experience of operating for decades?
Certainly, this is the historical pattern, not just with Hezbollah, but before Hezbollah with other Lebanese groups. Israel went in 1978, 1982. They got bogged down, eventually had to pull out. There were incursions in 1996. And then effectively Israel getting a bloody nose in 2006 when they went in on the ground. Now, in this case, Hezbollah's command and control has been decimated. You've had the assassinations of the leaders, including Hassan Nasrallah. You've had the disruption of communications with the pager and the walkie-talkie attacks. So I don't think you're talking about like Hezbollah having this very organized effort. They have been damaged, but you still have the local Hezbollah groups who are going to be there along the border. And quite clearly, they've decided they are not simply going to surrender or withdraw. So you can expect more of this in coming days if the Israelis persist with the ground assault.
Well, today's strikes on Beirut, are they one of the biggest, or if not the biggest, we've seen by Israel on Lebanon's capital?
You just lose a sense of biggest now. I mean, you talk about now with the weeks of this escalation, and you're talking about entire city blocks that could be wiped out because it's not just that the Israelis are carrying out the attacks, they're using up to 2,000-pound bombs to carry this out. And so the question is, you and I could come back each day and say, is it the biggest? Is it the biggest? The question here is, are we in an open-ended campaign which will level part of Beirut as well as other parts of Lebanon? Are we in an Israeli attack which has no defined endgame, but simply is meant to destroy the country as well as trying to destroy Hezbollah?
Are we in an open-ended game? So far, we don't seem to have any indication that there is an end game. Is that your view?
Look, I'm going to connect Gaza and Lebanon here in the sense that the Israeli military had been telling Benjamin Netanyahu for months, you don't have an end game here. You're not going to destroy Hamas. You're not getting the hostages back that Hamas took last October 7th. Benny Gantz, who was in the war cabinet, now in opposition, said, what is your end game? Repeatedly. It's because Netanyahu doesn't have an end game in Gaza, because he won't agree to a ceasefire, that he opened up the Lebanese front. But he opened up the Lebanese front with no clear goal here either of what the end game here is. I need to be blunt here. I think either Benjamin Netanyahu kills every Hamas leader and every Hezbollah leader. And when he does that, he might declare victory. But unless he can kill every single one of those leaders, including Yahya Sinwar, the overall Hamas leader, this war will not stop, or it won't have a defined end game unless it's Benjamin Netanyahu who is pushed out of power.
And how are Benjamin Netanyahu's actions being seen at home, with Israel facing war on several fronts now?
If I talked to you a few weeks ago, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were coming out in protest because the hostages weren't coming back. They were saying to Netanyahu, look, make the hostages the priority, not the destruction of Hamas. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, was saying this privately, but it's a key reason why Netanyahu opened up the Lebanese front to release that pressure. Now he has got a temporary boost in support. He's got breathing space both from that invasion of Lebanon and from the Iranian missile strikes. Even though those were largely demonstration strikes, now Netanyahu can say, look, you can't get rid of me. I'm the guy who is pursuing victory in Lebanon as well as Gaza, and I'm the guy protecting you from Iran. And for the moment, how long that moment is the key question. that means Netanyahu does not fall, but he actually safeguards his future.
Well, we're still waiting to see if Israel will retaliate after Iran conducted one of its largest ballistic missile strikes in Israel. What are the likely consequences? Do you think there is a possibility that Israel could do nothing?
Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to attack Iran in 2012. This is a long-standing issue. At that point, it was the Israeli military, the intelligence services that held him back. He may want to attack Iran. He might have that personal wish. I think logically, however, you don't have a direct Israel-Iran war if the Iranian regime carries out a demonstration attacks and then steps back. No, I think the consequence of the Israel-Iran theater is not a direct escalation. It's that it opens up the space for further Israeli operations in Gaza and Lebanon, and for many more civilians to be killed in the process.
Well, Hamas, the health authorities in Gaza say the latest Israeli strikes on southern Gaza have killed 51 people. Fighting there hasn't abated 1 year on from the start of the war.
It won't. And again, this is part of the wider dynamic that what Netanyahu and his inner circle have done is they fixed the world's eyes on Lebanon. They fixed Israeli eyes on Lebanon. So who notices, beyond Hamas, those 51 who were killed in the last 24 hours? Who noticed the 60 who were killed the day before, including 12 children? Who noticed the strikes on a school and on an orphanage being used as shelters? Because if people don't notice in Gaza, then those Israeli mass killings don't make a sound. And again, that plays to the benefit of, you've guessed it, Benjamin Netanyahu.
And yet, Scott, we've repeatedly heard calls from the international community for de-escalation, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. Are they having any effect at all?
I'm going to be blunt here, because I get asked this question every interview. You ask it quite rightly. Look, you want de-escalation? If you want de-escalation, you have to cut military aid to Israel that's being used in these attacks. You have to call for an unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon. And if Israel does not agree, you have to say that is unacceptable. You have to say that as a unified voice, which means you need the Americans, you need the Germans as part of it. If you don't do that, you and I will keep having the same question and that same answer again and again and again.
Scott Lucas, always good to talk. Thanks so much for your time, as always.
Hey, thanks to you.